Okay, you should be good.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Welcome, everybody, to the DEI committee meeting. So, just a quick announcement on my co-chair. So Dan is, I'm assuming Dan's not joining us. He's okay. So I just want to let folks know that I was co-chairing this committee with Dan Shively, and Dan, he announced at the last board meeting that he will be leaving the OWEB board and we'll have a new person coming on from the Forest Service. So today I will be chairing the committee and into the foreseeable future until we figure out potentially another co-chair. So just wanted to let folks know that. And then we'll go ahead and get started with, I want to remind everyone that the meeting is being streamed live on OWEB's YouTube channel and being recorded. For those watching, the meeting materials are in the board committee section of the OWEB website. Committee materials are toward the bottom of the page, and viewers can click on the relevant committee and have access to the current meeting materials as well as past meeting recordings. So we'll go ahead and start with introductions. So good morning, everyone. My name is Kelly Coates, and I am the tribal representative on the OWEB board and the current chair of the DEI committee. I'm also the natural resources director for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians. And I will kick it to Liza Jane to introduce.
Good morning. I'm Liza Jane McAllister, and I represent the public at large on the OWEB board and serve as their co-chair. I'll kick it to Chris.
Thanks, Liza. My name is Chris Allen. I'm a non-voting board member representing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And I'll pass it to Amy.
Hi, Amy Charette with OWEB and the Region 6 program representative. And I will send it to Eric Hartstein.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Eric Hartstein, policy coordinator at OWEB. And I'll pass it over to Bruce.
Can you hear me? Oh, I'm Bruce Buckmaster. I'm a public member from Astoria, Oregon. Thank you.
Okay, how about Eric Williams?
Good morning, Eric Williams, Restoration Grant Program Manager at OWEB. And I'll pass it to Courtney.
Good morning, Monitoring and Reporting Program Manager at OWEB. Oh, Courtney Schaff. To Renee.
Good morning, folks. Renee Davis, Acquisitions and Special Programs Manager at OWEB, and I think Steph is the only one left.
Good morning, Stephanie Page, Acting Executive Director at OWEB.
Thanks. And Nicole, can you just introduce yourself for the group too, as the woman behind the curtain making everything happen?
Yeah, you're showing all my power back here. Hi, everyone. Nicole Bettinardi. I'm the Executive Assistant and Board Liaison.
Thank you. Okay, well, I'll do a quick review of the meeting agenda. Thank you, Amy, for putting this together. We'll have an update on engagement with non-traditional partners and government-to-government outreach. We'll have an update on the DEI resolution. Update on the OWEB DEI action plan that was submitted to DAS. Update on the Drinking Water Source Protection Rulemaking Advisory Committee and Small Grant Rulemaking Advisory Committee. Status update on the Monsanto settlement legislation. And that's all we have for today. And then I would like to acknowledge that we did receive one written public comment. And do we have any public comment in person today, Nicole?
During public comment period, if you want to ask folks to raise hand, are we at that stage now?
No, we will do that. Are we at that stage?
Yeah. Okay, if any members of the public want to raise their hand on Zoom, if they want to provide public comment. I don't see anyone on this meeting actually anymore, so no, we do not.
Okay. All right, thank you, Nicole.
And Kelly, Aaron joined after you did introductions.
Oh, thank you, Courtney. Hi, Aaron, good morning. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself for the group?
Hi, good morning. Sorry I'm late. My name is Aaron Curtis. I am the representative from the Bureau of Land Management.
Thanks, Aaron. Good to see you.
Good.
Okay, so let's get started with our agenda. We'll start with the engagement with non-traditional partners and government-to-government outreach.
Great. All right. Well, I'll go through the outreach that happened since the last committee meeting and then also preview one upcoming meeting. So since the last quarterly DEI committee meeting, myself and then one of these conversations involved Kelly Coates and Liz Redon as well. That was with Elderberry Wisdom Farm, and we got to tour the farm in Southeast Salem with Rose Highbear, as well as some other board members, staff, and volunteers from the farm, and learn about their work to engage Native American youth in traditional cultural practices and cultivating native plants. So it was a wonderful visit. I know Liz has had some follow-up conversations with Rose as well following that meeting. And before I continue, Kelly, is there anything else that you'd like to add about that visit?
Thanks, Stephanie. It was a really interesting visit. We had some really good conversations with Rose and some of the board members from Elderberry Wisdom Farm, and some of the folks that are working at the farm doing the cultivation. It was really interesting, and I really think that what they're trying to do is fantastic and really needed. And it would be, great if OWEB could find a way to support them and find that, nexus to the farm and restoration. So we talked a lot about how we make that connection with them. And so it was a really wonderful day and great meeting with folks, and I learned quite a bit. So.
Likewise, it was a great day. So in addition to that, let's see, I met with Hui Ong with Meyer Memorial Trust. He's a senior program officer with the Our Resilient Places program, and just did an OWEB 101, talked a little bit about the new Monsanto fund and the Environmental Restoration Council. And then I also did some follow-up introductions to him and then just other non-traditional partners that I've met with over the last couple of years. And in some cases, those folks already had connections with Meyer, and in some cases they didn't. So just did some email intros to connect him with those folks. He's relatively new on board with Meyer. I met with Lauren Gwynn, who's the new director of the OSU Center for Small Farms and Community Food Systems. And a particular focus of conversation was the Oregon Ag Heritage Program, and sent her some follow-up information about OAHP. And then Mark, when I had asked the board for recommendations on folks to reach out to, one of the folks that Mark Labhart had recommended was Amy Patrick with Oregon Hunters Association. So I reached out to her. She and OHA were involved in the legislative discussions about the Monsanto program. So that was definitely a topic that we talked about, the status and the rollout of that program, and then also just general opportunities and connections with OWEB programs. And then in terms of government to government outreach, Ken Fetcho Liz Redon, myself, and our incoming executive director, Sarah O'Brien, will be visiting the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde on Friday. So we're looking forward to that visit. So that is coming right up. And then I also wanted to just go over the regular either quarterly or monthly meetings and some other outreach with partners that I've met with before, just so folks kind of know that this is ongoing. We have regular quarterly meetings with conservation community members, with agriculture community members. Sorry, did I say monthly? Quarterly meetings with ag and conservation. So just to make sure I got that right. And then we also have regular quarterly meetings with organic community members, and that includes grower representatives as well as packers and marketers. So that also occurs on a quarterly basis. And then we have a monthly meeting with the Conservation Partnership. So that is Oregon Association of Conservation Districts, Network of Oregon Watershed Councils, the Ocean, which works with conservation employees and districts around the state, and then the Coalition of Oregon Land Trusts. So that's who participates in those monthly meetings. And then just a couple of other meetings that occurred over the outreach things that occurred over the last quarter. I think I mentioned at the last DEI committee meeting that I had submitted an article to Oregon Cattlemen's Association's magazine about OWEB programs. And I adapted that article to be appropriate for seed growers and submitted it to Oregon Seed Council's regular publication. Then before the April board meeting, I got to tour together with Kobe Menton, our Region 5 program representative. We got to tour a strategic implementation area, which is a water quality improvement focused area with the Keating Soil and Water Conservation District and a few other folks, including from ODA and OECD. And so I worked together with them to prepare an article that we're working with ODA to edit and then submit that to Oregon Cattlemen's Association magazine, just highlighting how OWEB and other grant funds are working together to support water quality improvements in the Lower Powder River Basin. So that is the quarterly update for today.
Thanks, Stephanie. Boy, I really wish you would do more outreach to people.
And let me add one more thing, and that is, given the potential connections of particularly drinking water source, but for that matter, all OWEB programs with forestry organizations as well, we've made sure we're looping in forestry organizations into the quarterly ag check-in meetings. Just one more FYI there.
That's great. Thank you, Stephanie. Okay, let's move on to the OWEB DEI resolution. So this one, it should be relatively quick discussion. I want to just remind folks of the kind of the process for how we're going to do this. The DEI resolution was presented at the last OWEB board meeting, and we are on track for presenting it to be voted on at the July board meeting. So that is the plan. We did have some public comment come in, and hopefully folks have been able to review that. And I'm going to go a little, we're going to go a little off book here. And I would like to, if we can, pull up the resolution, and based on the public comment that we received today, I think we can add just a little bit of language, a couple of sentences to call out. And I'm going to pull the public comment up. This was from Maya Cook. And essentially, what she is asking is she would like to invite the committee to more fully address disability inclusion in future resolution drafts. While we are mentioned in the list of environmental justice communities, we are omitted from paragraph 4 describing types of diversity. So if folks are amenable, I'd like to just add something in paragraph 4. Yep.
I'm thinking in this sentence is probably, can you guys see that okay?
Yes. And what is the language that we use for the environmental justice community? I'm wondering if we could use some similar language here.
Stephanie, I'm not sure where that is in the environmental justice description.
Okay, sorry, I was just looking online at kind of inclusion statements and how did they word references to disability, and they just have, when they kind of list kind of we're inclusive of different communities, they just say disability, or so that might be, or like disabled communities. So yeah, let me do a little poking around regarding the environmental justice section.
Okay. In the public comment, a couple of things I'm pulling out. One thing is neurodivergence as well. I don't know if that would be appropriate. And I see Liza Jane's hand, so go for it.
Thank you, Kelly. Is it appropriate to use the word abilities? Would that be all inclusive? So, when we're describing that diverse in many ways, nations of origin, race, immigration status, abilities, and level of income, I think if we call out one, it could be quite a list. And
I like that, Liza Jane.
okay.
I do too. And one thing I'll offer is I mean, I think we could check with the Office of Cultural Change at DAS just to see, like, is this kind of a common and accepted way to reference inclusion of people with disabilities in an inclusion statement, just so that we're not inadvertently being inconsistent with how communities in general would prefer to be referred to.
I like that idea, Stephanie. Okay, but I can't tell if Liza Jane or Bruce had their hand up first. Sorry, I was taking notes. Oh, no, okay, Bruce. Thanks, Liza Jane.
Thank you. I didn't read the comment, the public comment, until earlier this morning, and I would like to publicly thank Maya Cook for sending that. As one of the authors of the resolution, I was humbled by it. That simply it was an area that it slipped through the cracks for me, and was so obvious based on her comment that I think we should address it. I'm a little concerned that we would do the editing so quickly here, since we just received that yesterday. If possible, I would ask our chair maybe to, if she has the time, to reach out to Maya and actually ask her if she has some suggestions on where she might see it fitting, putting it in that fourth paragraph, how this affects operations of our partners, or our attention to operations to our partners, as opposed to the impact of the projects. I'm not sure where it best fits. Abilities, I think sort of addresses it, but I'm not sure if it addresses it to the level that we need to look at it. So as far as process, I would be fine with approving whatever edits are required to include this issue appropriately in the resolution, and I'm perfectly comfortable with the chair making those edits between now and the July meeting for the presentation, if that's an appropriate way of doing it. So thank you, Maya, and Kelly. Heavy lies the head that wears the crown, but if you would, any edits that you would like to make that you feel comfortable with at the end, I'm certainly fine with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Bruce. Yeah, in her public comment, she actually called out the omission from paragraph 4. So that's why we're talking about putting this language within paragraph 4. Stephanie, I see your hand.
So I located the environmental justice communities definition, and at the very end of the definition, it says communities traditionally underrepresented in public processes and adversely harmed by environmental and health hazards, including seniors, youth, and persons with disabilities. So, but I think to Bruce's point, we can do a little more research on what would be the most appropriate way to incorporate the language into that paragraph.
Okay.
And oh, sorry. One other thing is, I think that's absolutely fine to go ahead and proceed as planned with voting on the resolution at the July meeting with these updates in there. I don't have any concerns about doing that.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And I like the idea of checking with DAS as well on this. Bruce? You're on mute, Bruce.
Environmental justice communities have generally, as we've applied that in the resolution, have referred to those impacted by projects and issues that we're trying to remediate or fix in the environment. A lot of what Maya was talking about was more the internal process of our partners and working within the environmental community. So I'm not sure. I like where we're going with the wording on paragraph 4, but I'm not sure if that fully covers the issues of recognizing in our DEI environmental justice our own housekeeping between us and our partners, and any barriers that we might have for people with disabilities. The last thing I will note that this morning I noticed that our most recent draft, I didn't find our most recent draft of the DEI EJ statement resolution on the website. So if we can keep that updated as best we can.
Okay. Okay, so I'll look for some head nods here. If folks are okay with it, I will work with OWEB staff. We'll reach out to DAS and we will add a little bit of language to this, keeping the added language obviously called out in track changes for when we present to the board in July, since it will differ slightly from the version that we showed the board at the last board meeting. So are folks okay with that? Yeah, okay. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments on the DEI resolution? Okay. All right, update on OWEB DEI action plan submitted to DAS. I think, Courtney, this is you, right?
Yes, good morning, everybody. So we, as part of the governor's expectations, OWEB developed and submitted last year the draft diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan. And then just last week, Eric Williams submitted OWEB's draft strategic plan to DAS. And the strategic plan drew heavily from parts of the diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan that was developed by staff in 2023. So they really support each other with, the diversity, equity, and inclusion action plan being a little bit more detailed. OWEB staff really thinking of it as more of a work plan that we want to keep as a living document. So last month, or several months ago, Stephanie and I met with folks from the Office of Cultural Change to receive feedback on the draft plan. And then just last month, I met with OWEB staff DEI team to talk through those comments and thinking about areas that we can update the plan. So what I want to ask of the board committee is how would you like to see and talk about the DEI action plan? We are really thinking about it as a living document. We want to look at it annually, provide updates to it, think about the things that we're achieving, adding new tasks to the document, and tracking our progress over time. It needs to be submitted every other year to DAS for updates. It's not a plan that's submitted annually, but I think it's, at least OWEB staff and executive team have talked about it, the importance of it, looking at it annually from an agency perspective and keeping it as a living document. So we didn't include it in any documents or attachments today because I really wanted to get feedback from all of you about how you would like to look at it, how would you like to be engaged in updating it, and what makes sense to you.
Thank you, Courtney. So I'll just give some quick feedback and then I'll open it up to other folks. I would like to see the plan and have a chance to review it and digest it a little bit prior to a meeting, but then I think we put it on as an agenda item at perhaps our next DEI committee meeting. And then we can devote a little bit more time to it, carve out a chunk of time so we can really, kind of fully digest it and go through things. So that's just my suggestion. And Bruce, I see your hand is up.
Thanks, Kelly. Courtney, I would love to see, once we have a board resolution, an element of the presentation being the nexus between the action plan and the board resolution, how those things overlay. Is anything falling between the cracks, or are we focused on something that isn't in the resolution that we've missed, vice versa? So that relationship between the board resolution and the staff action plan while they may not be seamless, they should be at the very least complementary.
Thanks for that feedback.
So, Liza Jane.
Thanks, Kelly. Courtney, without seeing it, I support all those good ideas, so we can make better suggestions. But if it's due to be sent back every other year, I think you said, for review, then yeah, every 6 months probably. Just, it's new for us. I think more often is better until we get better, and then we could stretch it out. But I think just as a top, without seeing it and really knowing, I think more often to get that in front of us would be better.
Thank you for all that feedback. So based on this conversation, what I hear is definitely sending out ahead of time, maybe working with Nicole to maybe get it sent to you earlier than just the normal agenda items for the board meeting and such. The OWEB staff team was going to meet again in July to finish kind of our cleanup and edits and recommended adjustments to the plan, then get it out to all of you so you have a good month or so to look at it ahead of the next committee meeting, which will be in September, and then work with Amy to make sure that the agenda has enough time for us to have a discussion about it. Great. And I will include in kind of the making sure that we talk about the connections between the strategic plan, the resolution, and the action plan as part of kind of that conversation and prep materials. Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Courtney. Okay. Update on the drinking water source protection rack and small grant rack. Eric Hartstein.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Kelly. So both the revisions to the small grant program rules and the new drinking water source protection rules will be before the full board for consideration next month at your board meeting. And so I'll focus here on a couple elements in both of the rulemaking endeavors that I believe are relevant for this committee. So to begin with the small grant rulemaking, really the impetus for this rulemaking, and I think really direct relevance to this committee, was the board's interest in expanding eligibility to the small grant program. So currently, tribes, watershed councils, and soil and water conservation districts are the only entities that are eligible to apply for and receive an OWEB small grant. And the proposed revisions to the rules will broaden that eligibility to all entities that are eligible to other OWEB grants through our Division 5 rules. And additionally, small grants in Oregon are in part administered by small grant teams around the state. And those small grant teams are currently composed of tribes, watershed councils, and SWCDs. And the proposed rule revisions would also broaden who can sit on those small grant teams to any eligible grant applicant within that small grant team region. We've run a public comment period for small grants. That period is over. We had a public hearing. We did not have anyone submit verbal comments. We did have a handful of written comments, and you'll see those along with an OWEB response to those written comments, as it will all be included in your board materials. And before I move on to drinking water source protection, I want to see if Eric Williams, you have anything to add on small grants.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I think the only thing I'd add is that this change driven by the board's comments, I think, is a really good one. And it's going to mean that the small grant teams will have to operate differently. And we're working on a way to help them do that. In the past, the small grant point of contact, who basically ran the program locally, wasn't compensated. We had an agreement with them, but there were no funds attached to it. And so because we're increasing our expectations of how the program is run, we're exploring ways that we could provide a small amount of funding for the small grant team lead to be able to do the kind of engagement that we're expecting to open up the program to as many interested eligible applicants as possible. And so that'll be a bit of a lift, particularly for Kathy Leopold, our fantastic small grant program coordinator. She's up to the challenge, but it's going to take a bit of work between the time the board adopts the rules and we set up the operations for the next biennium. We have about a year to put that in place. So I think we'll be fine in terms of timeline, but it will take a bit of work. And then we'll need to do some specific engagement with our small grant teams to help them understand, those new expectations. And hopefully the result will be a more diverse pool of applicants in the program, accessing those funds that, as we all know, are a great way for folks maybe that aren't familiar with restoration to understand what it means, particularly for landowners that are having worked on their properties. So we're really looking forward to that. And I just want to say thanks to the board for really pushing us along a bit to do this. I think it's a really good thing, and it's one of our programs that probably doesn't get an awful lot of attention or generate a lot of excitement. But I think for those of us that are working with our grantees and doing the projects on the ground, it really does generate a lot of excitement for our grantees and the landowners that they work with in their communities. So I'll just say thanks for all of that.
Great. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. I have a quick question before we move on. And I really appreciate that, because that's exactly what I was thinking, having been a part of a small grant team, is just the amount of work that goes into convening the meetings, putting together all of the grant applications and the review materials, getting those out. It's quite a bit of coordination. So I'm glad that we're exploring the opportunity of funding that, especially with the expanded group of folks within those small grants. Did we receive comments from some of those small grant team leads? Do we know? I don't know if we had anybody, identify themselves as a small grant team lead or small grant recipient or part of a small grants team kind of a thing, but did we have pretty good engagement from some of our existing small grants teams around the state in this?
Yeah, I could start there, and Eric, you can maybe fill in any gaps. So one, we had a really good, robust discussion on this topic with our rulemaking advisory committee, which was comprised of folks that are very familiar with and kind of live and breathe small grants. And we did hear throughout the rulemaking process, both from the RAC and from comments that were submitted in advance of the RAC meetings, that, well, this is great. You're talking about expanding the applicant pool. You're talking about expanding the size of the small grant teams themselves, but it's going to require more administration. So if that's the case, we would appreciate some support to do that. So I think that was kind of one of the main drivers of including the option to have that support for the small grant teams to administer the programs in their region. Was having that comment from not only from the RAC but from external folks as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. Okay, so the other rulemaking that we're looking to be wrapping up here in the next month or so is the drinking water source protection. So again, this will be before the board next month, and this was provided to OWEB during the 2023 legislative session, and it's intended to benefit community drinking water systems through a program that acquires land from willing sellers or through covenants, easements, or other types of agreements with willing sellers to protect land for community drinking water benefits. So of, I think, direct relevance to this committee, that small water systems are really the focus with this particular grant program. And the way that the rules have been developed, or the draft rules have been developed, eligible applicants include water suppliers with service populations at or below 25,000 users. So water suppliers serving higher populations would not be eligible for this grant program. In addition, one of the evaluation criteria included in the draft rules is looking at if the water supplier is economically distressed due to small population size, the population served is lower income, or the population served is rural. The public comment period is still open on this grant, or on this rulemaking through Friday. And we did have a virtual public hearing last month. We did not have anyone attend to wish to provide comments, but we're hoping we get some written comments before the end of the week. Renee, do you have anything to add onto this one?
Thanks, Eric. Just a bit, in terms of the evaluation criteria that Eric described, those tied back directly to House Bill 2010, which was the enabling legislation. So being mindful of how we are consistent with the direction to the agency per what is now in statute, but also recognizing that throughout the rulemaking process, considerations around, for example, match funding levels. So the RAC has set the match at a 5% match, balancing interest in using these state dollars to leverage federal investments, but also making the program approachable by not coming out of the gates with a 25% match, as an example. Staying in really close coordination. Audrey Squires, our drinking water source protection specialist, has done an amazing job in terms of coordination and outreach with other agency programs. So for example, OHA and Business Oregon through the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, DEQ, Clean Water State Revolving Fund, given that there has been a lot of past outreach and understanding what some of those community characteristics are, that I think certainly do align with the legislative intent of this program, but also are mindful of DEI consideration. So really leveraging those strong relationships that OHA and DEQ have with water suppliers, and how they're helping communities that are facing some of these really serious challenges, including climate-related challenges because of low flow considerations, in addition to land use impacts on their source water supplies. So those are the only pieces I would add. Thanks, Eric, for that.
Great, thanks, Renee. Any questions?
I have a question, Eric. This is Liza Jane. What's the cap? The amount on these?
So they're actually in the legislation. the cap was $3 million, which we've ported over to the rules. And it's so the total amount that was provided during this biennium was $5 million for the grant program, and the cap would be $3 million.
Meaning that somebody could write a grant to us for $3 million? Okay, thank you.
Liza Jane, just a quick follow-up on that. I would say this was a balance of recognizing what it takes to likely do projects like this and not wanting to, in rule, have the program limited by the first funding allocation, remaining hopeful that additional funding would come through. And if we simply use the $5 million currently available to set the tone within rule, you might be at a $500,000 level, and we're not sure that makes for viable source water protection projects. But there was absolutely a balancing of competing considerations, given that the first allocation was only $5 million.
Okay, that's all I've got for the both rulemaking endeavors, and so you should expect to see the draft rules along with supporting materials in your board packets in I think about 6 weeks.
Great, thank you, Eric. Okay, so the next agenda item we have is a status update on the Monsanto settlement legislation. So is this Eric?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
Again.
Yep.
Thanks, Kelly. So this will be a little bit similar to what was presented to the board back in April, with a bit of an update here towards the end, but wanted to provide a fair amount of background on how we got to this point, because it is, you know, a little bit complex. So this all kind of started in late 2022, where Monsanto settled for nearly $700 million with the state of Oregon over pollution associated with PCBs in the state. And the settlement agreement describes how the funds will be used, which was reiterated in Senate Bill 1561, which passed during the 2024 legislative session here a few months ago, which states that the funding will be used to supplement efforts by recognized tribal governments, executive branch agencies, and disproportionately impacted communities for environmental remediation or restitutionary projects or purposes having a nexus with environmental harms to air, water, soil, or other natural resources or human health caused by environmental contamination, particularly the presence of PCBs. So Senate Bill 1561 sets the process for the distribution of the settlement funds using OWEB as the vehicle through a to be established Environmental Restoration Council and Environmental Restoration Fund that I'll describe here in the next couple of slides. The Environmental Restoration Council, which is set up through Senate Bill 1561, is unique in that it's, for us, is that it's an independent body. So this is really important. This is separate from the OWEB board. The bill provides that the council will consist of 11 members, including the governor, attorney general, or their designees, along with the directors of DEQ, ODFW, the Oregon Health Authority, or their designees, and 6 members of the public, which are appointed by the governor, who have interest in environmental remediation and the impacts from contamination to water, air, or land on people or the environment. And at least 2 members must possess scientific expertise with the environmental or human health impacts of PCBs or other similar substances. And a member of the House of Representatives and a member of the Senate will also serve as non-voting members on the council. And once the council is set up, we'll be busy developing strategic priorities and adopting rules related to both fund transfers and a grant program, which I'll describe here in the next slide. And then those strategic priorities will be developed with the Environmental Justice Council and state agencies that will be applying for the state agency program fund, as well as folks that are interested in the disproportionately impacted community fund. So rulemaking will be a big part of all these different funds. And as a part of the strategic priorities, the council will determine if distribution to these funds will occur on an annual or biennial basis, or if they will be doing things like committing funds for more than one biennium, or will it be just on sort of the biennial basis. So the Environmental Restoration Fund is set up like an endowment through a long-term distribution policy that would be adopted by the council, with essentially the interest on the fund being applied annually to 3 separate sub-funds. 50% would go to the state agency program fund, where allocations to state agencies could be used to supplement existing programs or projects that are consistent with the terms of the settlement agreement. 25% would go to the Tribal Nation Natural Resource Program Fund, with transfers made in equal amounts to the federally recognized tribes in Oregon for projects, programs that are consistent with the settlement agreement. And then 25% would go to the Disproportionately Impacted Community Fund, which would involve a grant program to nonprofits to carry out those projects or programs that are consistent with the settlement agreement. So OWEB would really be involved in all of these funds to a certain extent, but this grant program is where OWEB might play a role in administering it, similar to existing OWEB grant programs. However, it's important to note that Senate Bill 1561 does include the language that the council could contract out administration of this grant program to a third party. So we'll know more about where this stands as the council is stood up and begins working their way through the rulemaking process and doing strategic prioritization. For funding, when we were developing the fiscal impact statement, we were assuming 5% interest on what is currently, or was currently at the time, about a $580 million balance, which would equate to $14 million for the grant program to disproportionately impacted communities, $14 million for the Tribal Nation Natural Resource Program Fund, and $28 million for the State Agency Program Fund. And this is per biennium. So these were our estimates, and it's important to know that, and that the council will be determining kind of how this long-term distribution will work, but it will be kind of similar to I think what our estimates will be, in that it will be set up like an endowment and be operating on the interest, which might fluctuate a little bit. That's where the long-term distribution policy will kind of play a little bit of a role in the allocations. And I guess a little bit more in how this would be set up like an endowment is that after 50 years, the council will make a recommendation to the legislature regarding the approach of, the current approach, which would be essentially expending the interest on the Environmental Restoration Fund, or to begin spending down the principal balance over the next 50 years. So really at a minimum, we're looking at this being a 100-year program. Okay, so next steps. So recruitment for a manager to oversee the program has just closed. And after we have someone on board in that capacity, we'll be recruiting additional OWEB staff who will have administrative, fiscal, policy, and project management roles and developing and administering the program. There was an initial $5 million allocation for program administration. And then beyond that, the bill provides for 0.25% of the principal balance to be used for program administration. And in addition to OWEB, ODFW, and DEQ, each received a position to provide for technical support for this program, and will really play a critical role with the Environmental Restoration Council and OWEB in the development of strategic priorities and the rules governing the programs. And they're also, I know, looking to coordinate with OWEB on the hiring of staff that will be kind of coming on board in the next few months. So in addition to ramping up staffing, OWEB will also be working with the governor's office on setting up the Environmental Restoration Council. And once the council has been set up, of course, embarking on the rulemaking and strategic prioritization process that I referenced earlier. So I'll stop there and see if Stephanie, you have anything to add?
Nope, that was great. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, happy to answer questions. And I see hands raised, but I have no idea of order.
I think we all actually raise our hands at the same time. So we'll go with Chris, then Bruce, then me.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, Eric, good summary of where things are at. Appreciate that. I'm curious from your perspective if you see a role for National Marine Fisheries Service or U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service or any other federal agencies, thinking of maybe EPA in this process. I guess I mean, I know this is a settlement with the state of Oregon, but just giving our involvement and interest in species conservation around the state, whether it's federally protected or trust species, I'm surprised that there's not some role for the federal government, particularly at least those three agencies, maybe even BLM Forest Service and others I'm forgetting. But anyway, any thoughts on possible involvement of the I guess thinking also primarily from the technical side of things in this process, whether it's the council membership or any of the program funds?
Yeah, great. That's a great question, Chris. I think that federal agency involvement could and probably will take place in both the strategic prioritization, making sure that, you mentioned EPA and others having those comments, engagement with agencies, make sure those comments are received through the strategic prioritization, and then through the rulemaking, I think, and how these are all set up, there might be opportunities to involve federal agency staff to participate on the racks, to utilize that expertise and setting up how these programs will be set up and then ultimately implemented.
All right. Well, I'm definitely interested in tracking any thoughts as this evolves in terms of my agency's involvement for sure. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, Eric, this is just a curious question. Does the state treasurer's office manage the endowment?
So I think the way that this is set up, and I'm kind of going pretty far out on my limb of understanding how treasury accounts work, but the fund will be administered by OWEB, is the way I understand it, and that then the council will be through that long-term distribution policy, setting up how they're going to be essentially acting as the executors of this.
Yeah, my question was more who's managing the 700 million? Is it an endowment run out of the state treasurer's office, and where they invest, how they invest, all those decisions being made, not who's managing the proceeds from the endowment?
Okay. Yeah, I believe that is Treasury that sets this up and runs sort of the investments.
Thanks. Okay, I have just a couple of questions because I just want to make sure that I'm getting this right. So since it's an endowment, we're estimating about 5% interest, and that's what's going to pay for everything per biennium. And the way that you have it broken out, it will be for the three kind of areas, it's 14 million, 14 million, and 28 million per biennium for the next 100 years.
It would be, yes. So it would be, and those are that kind of just those estimates that we've been utilizing, and it would be for the next 50 years.
50 years,
then,
okay.
Yeah, and then at that point, the council will make a recommendation to the legislature, and the legislature would decide if they want to kind of keep that system in place or then begin to spend down the principal balance at the same time. So I would say for the next 50 years, it would be set up like this. And then beyond that, it's a little bit of uncertainty.
It's a little tricky to plan this maybe 100 years in advance. 50 is pretty good, I have to say. So, and then my next question is in relation to the program manager that OWEB is hiring. Would that person, because it's a little, like the council is managing everything. It's separate from the OWEB board, but it is an OWEB staff person that will be managing things from the OWEB side of things, since OWEB will be administering the funds. Will this manager for OWEB also be coordinating the council, like when the council, pulling the council together for meetings, prepping materials for the council, that kind of thing? Or will the council have a separate person that's managing them or coordinating them, I guess?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, yes, the program manager will play a really important role in interfacing with the council. There is, however, administrative support that was provided through Senate Bill 1561, which will allow for OWEB to hire administrative staff for the council as well. And yeah, Stephanie, I think you might have something to add on that.
Yep, I just wanted to add one thing, which is yes, the manager position is housed in OWEB's budget, and we are running the recruitment. But this is definitely a priority for the governor, this program, and the governor's office is very extensively engaged and will work very closely with the position. So I just wanted to share that it will be a little different in terms of the manager's relationship to OWEB versus some of the other managers that our board is accustomed to working with.
Thank you. I was wondering, that was what I was trying to get at, is just kind of how that works, because it is set up differently. But that's the one thing I love about OWEB. If we're anything, we're adaptable, right, guys? Like, we are very adaptable. Okay, any other questions on this topic? Well, I really appreciate that, Eric. I know we've heard this a couple of times. We heard it at the board meeting. We're hearing it again, but I think this is, it's really important. It's really, really big for the state of Oregon. This is a big initiative. So just really appreciate, I think, kind of repetition with some of these things is important. So just really appreciate you taking the time today to kind of go through this with us again and give us some updates. Okay, I believe we have reached the end of the agenda. So I am just going to check in again with Nicole. So again, I want to acknowledge the written comment that we received from Maya Cook. Thank you, Maya, for that. And then just ask if there's anybody on for verbal comment again one more time.
Thanks, Kelly. No, actually, no outside folks have joined us. No public members have joined us, so we don't even have to call for that.
Okay, thanks, Nicole. Okay, so anything for the good of the order that anyone would like to bring up? Okay, seeing none, potential topics for future committee meetings. So we have our standing engagement with non-traditional partners and the government to government outreach. We'll be reviewing the DEI action plan. Hopefully we won't have the OWEB DEI resolution on here because we'll be voting on it at the July board meeting. So that's big. That's gonna give us some time on our future agendas. Let's see, we'll have the vote by the full board on the drinking water source protection and small grant rack. So I don't know that we'll need to bring that up at our next meeting. But correct me if I'm wrong there, OWEB staff. Okay. So really just the engagement, the government to government outreach, the DEI action plan, which will take probably some time to go through that, a significant portion of the agenda. So we should leave some time for that. And then am I missing anything else? I know things will come up between now and the next meeting as well, that things that we have unfolding, but is there anything that I'm missing now? Bruce.
It doesn't look to me like we'll have time on the agenda for the at the next committee meeting. Moving forward with committee meetings, I'm curious if the committee would be interested in hearing maybe short presentations from communities, environmental representatives that we've addressed through DEI, EJ. There are a lot of them out there. Stephanie's meeting them. I would find it interesting to hear from some of these groups, some of these communities. So maybe the opportunity to have short presentations at future committee meetings would be helpful for us.
Stephanie?
Thanks, Bruce. I'll mention one thing I think the board did. It was just before I joined the agency in maybe 2021 was there was a panel at a full board meeting on DEI and community engagement, I think from some OWEB partners. And that I think that's an idea that we've been batting around internally as a future full board meeting topic, as having a panel. So we could certainly do it at a committee meeting. I do wonder if it's something that would be of interest to the full board. And so that I think we can keep thinking about that offline between this meeting and the next meeting. And maybe it doesn't have to be an either or either. I mean, we could have a little bit of both, but I do wonder if that might be of interest to the full board.
Thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. Anytime we can hear from folks and get feedback, I think that's positive. I think that would be something that the full board would probably be interested in hearing about. I know the board loves to hear from folks, especially at the board meetings when we can engage more with them. So I think that's a good idea. Okay, anything else for either today go to the order or future topics? Okay. Hearing none, we get about 15 minutes back in our day. So again, like if OWEB isn't, if we're anything, we are, really adaptable, and we're very efficient. So I'm going to end the meeting on those two positive notes for all of us to continue our week with adaptability and efficiency. So thank you everyone for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you to the OWEB staff for all the work you do prepping these meetings and keeping us fully briefed on everything. So have a great week, everybody.